his eyes were too dim to see. But with an eye towards the grammar of each word, another translation seems to be the right one. Instead of his eyes were too dim to see, the translation should be instead, his eyes were too dim from seeing. But what can we even make of that? How can you become blind from sight? We're all familiar with what happens to us when our picture is taken. The bright flash goes off in our eyes, and our vision is temporarily impaired, making us blind for a few seconds. But something more lasting seems to be at play here. Had this just been a temporary state of blindness, like what affects us after our picture is taken, Isaac's sight would have returned long before Jacob came in to deceive him. But as we know, Isaac's eyes remained blinded long after this initial verse. So clearly it was not just a flash going off in his eyes that made him blind. The most logical explanation I could come up with is that this verse is actually talking about something far deeper and less literal than physical sight. Perhaps instead of physical blindness, in this case we are focused more on moral or mental blindness. Perhaps for whatever reason, Isaac was so deeply affected by something that he saw in his life that he was no longer able to see the world around him clearly. Working within this framework, instead of seeing Isaac's blindness as a physical impairment, we can instead see it as an early biblical version of post-traumatic stress disorder. Believe it or not, the rabbis actually saw it this way centuries ago as well. An ancient rabbinic story teaches us that Isaac's eyes were dimmed from that experience, which of course would be the binding of Isaac, the Akedah. The story teaches us that as Isaac lay on the altar at Mount Moriah, just before Abraham was about to sacrifice him, right before the ram appeared, angels from up above wept, and their tears dripped into Isaac's eyes, leaving lasting imprints. As Isaac aged, the story teaches us that these imprints slowly impaired his vision and made him blind. Even if the idea of angels crying blinding tears into Isaac's eyes doesn't resonate with you, the basic premise of this story, that the Akedah had long-reaching effects on Isaac's life, makes sense. Think back to a time when something terrifying was about to happen to you. When you felt as if no matter what you did, you couldn't stop the event from taking place. Imagine how you would have dealt with it if someone you loved and trusted did nothing to help you avoid this terrifying position. Imagine if then the whole experience remained in the back of your mind, always the unspoken elephant in the room, but never openly discussed or addressed for your entire life. Clearly, an experience like that would leave a mark on you as a person. Personally, I can imagine an experience like that consuming me and becoming the only thing I could think about, making me a shell of a person. I could see it blinding me to the world around me, preventing me from not only noticing the reality of what was happening around me, but more importantly, preventing me from participating in it. I can see why Isaac was unable to distinguish between his two sons, even when he went blindly favoring Esau over Jacob, despite that it seems clear that God favored Jacob. Isaac just couldn't see what was happening around him. He didn't see his sons for who they were. He couldn't. He was blinded. But what if Isaac hadn't kept this experience inside of him? What if he had reached out to others and shared his story instead of keeping it within his own heart? What if he hadn't allowed his childhood experience to so deeply blind him, but had instead worked with those around him to slowly regain his sight? Perhaps he would have healed. Perhaps he would have been able to process what he saw up on Mount Moriah and would have been able to eventually move forward. Perhaps he would have seen the world more clearly, even his children more clearly, for the people that God saw them to be. Perhaps our Torah reading this week would look much different. It's my hope that we can all learn from Isaac's blindness in this week's portion, and that we won't let it become a reality in each of our own lives. Though I sincerely hope that none of us have had an experience like Isaac's. We all have stories and experiences that it would do us good to share and process with others. Instead of being Isaac and turning inward, focusing on ourselves and forcing ourselves to handle all that life throws our way independently, I hope that we will all take a different path and reach out to those around us for support. Not only will reaching out benefit each of us as individuals and prevent us from becoming mentally blinded, but it will also help prevent the same blindness in those to whom we